So welcome to the node.js Technical Steering Committee meeting for October 4th, 2023. We'll follow our standard agenda, which was as created in issue number 1446 in the repo. First thing, any announcements that people would like to share?
I remember that if you want to, I want to remember everybody, if they want a ticket for Node.js Conf, for NodeConf EU, I have a discount code that you can use. So please ping me if you want the discount code.
Okay. Any other announcements? Okay, any updates on the board front, Matteo?
Not really, not from the last few weeks. I think we covered in the last few meetings all things board. The important one that we need to be aware of is the fact that the travel fund is out of money. Okay, this is the unless something can be done, new requests cannot be approved. So, and we have been asked for to provide more or less a little bit more of an estimate on, if needed, for what next year. This is very hard to know, but it goes into the other question of what we want to do for events in 2024 that we did before. So, yeah.
Okay, Rich, anything on the CPC side?
I don't have anything to add. I did miss the CPC meeting this week, so if you or Matteo were there and if something came up that should be shared, please share away. But I skimmed the issue and didn't see anything that needed immediate attention other than what Matteo just mentioned, which is that the travel fund. There's it's out of money, which arguably is a good thing. It means we're using the resources that are being allocated. So that's a positive, at least I'm looking at it that way.
Yeah, and I think I did open an issue to suggest we ask for more, at least, unless if you don't ask, the answer is you don't get a yes. So we might as well ask. And I think the next working session next week will be around like how much do we ask for, maybe for this year or the increase for next year.
Yeah, there's some.
Go ahead.
There's some discussion on that. A new travel fund process and so on and so forth happening. So if you are interested on the stuff, please. There are relevant issues on the CPC repo, so go there.
Yeah, I think specifically, like Benjamin mentioned, that the collaborator summits are really important. There is I think what Matteo is alluding to is there's some discussion on some how we would rate travel requests. So it'd be good if you jumped in there or people jumped in there to basically make those kinds of points like, hey, collaborator summits are really important versus, say, supporting speakers or vice versa, because there may be some sort of prioritization built into to that process. Okay, let's move on to the issues that were tagged for the agenda. We're going to try and knock out a few of the shorter ones and then go back to the longer ones that may have some more discussion. The first one is collaborator changes, more privacy. This is 834. I don't know who added that for the agenda. If you're here and want to jump in, go for it as I look for that.
I probably did.
Okay.
So basically, we have a moderation repo. It predates the moderation team. And the TSC taking a more active role in keeping the project friendly and welcoming. And basically what we used to do many years ago is, I think as many of you know probably, go there and whenever there was like an interpersonal issue, raise it there. And we have learned over the years, it's very important to give people privacy when discussing interpersonal affairs. And what we've been doing the last few years is we've been handling like the moderation team and TSC interpersonal conflict in private, whether it's the moderation team taking action and updating the TSC or the TSC taking action. And we've been using the moderation team more for like spam users or like monitoring stuff that's on Hacker News, that sort of thing. So the ask here is to, like for the moderation repository, to stop people from posting code of conduct reports there to change our process, to explicitly tell people to ask the moderation team. And in addition, for collaborator nominations, it proposes changing the process from opening a public issue and like first an issue in the collaborators repository, which is suggested but not part of the process, to sending an email, like objecting by sending an email to the nominator rather than doing it publicly. This is to better preserve the privacy of like potential collaborators and collaborators in the cases of the moderation.
Something that would be useful here is not to send it directly, but run it via the TSC before everything. So it's I don't think it's the reporting to the moderator makes any sense. Sorry, to report, not the moderator, to the report to the nominator, however you want to call it. I don't. Sorry, I'm on the go.
So I can name a few examples. I don't want to name individuals where in the past people have blocked nominations, and then through facilitation with the project and usually the nominator, people were able to address these concerns and like become collaborators. So I don't want like something that was raised is if the email goes directly to this TSC, people won't necessarily be able to like work things out, and it will always be a rejection. But just to clarify, the process in that like proposing that issue is that people object either by sending an email to the TSC or by sending an email to the nominator. Anyway, those are like the proposed changes. The issue is open. Take a look. If it looks good to everyone.
And I guess maybe if I add in like the email to the nominator is that maybe the nominator will convince the person with the objection that it makes sense after all, right? And that's easily done in a smaller group. Is that the
right? Exactly. Basically, the principle is that like the more people get to save face and not feel attacked in the nomination process and in moderation in general, the better outcomes we get, because like they're more open to feedback and like like another option is the other way around, because the feedback about the nomination is given in private to the nominator may decide like to rescind the nomination. That's another outcome. Like saying, okay, you convinced me, it's not reconcilable, and the nomination should not proceed. So in either case, I think it's just overall better for everyone.
okay? Thanks. And you're looking for just people to like thumbs up the issue, right?
Yeah, I mean it's a process change, so it needs TSC approval. So basically, like it's open. I wanted to bring it to the meeting because it's like process change. Now we onboard collaborators, which is very important. Just to make sure the TSC is aware, and I'll give it maybe another week in the admin repo, and if everything, like if we still have consensus, I'll just go ahead and make those changes.
Right, and you say when you make those changes, like PR them in somewhere, right?
Yeah, PR the admin repo basically,
yeah,
and the moderation policy.
Yeah, okay.
Yagiz has his hand up.
Is it possible to anonymize the whole nomination period? Like any person can nominate it, we know who that is, but rejections can come with an anonymous way so that we don't point fingers. And like, is that possible? Theoretically, cryptographically, it's possible, but like maybe that's because I'm afraid people won't want to get out of their comfort zone to send an email to TSC and saying that we don't want, like, I don't want this person to be a collaborator or not.
So it's sufficient to send an email, like in the new proposal, to a TSC member. You don't have to send an email to the entire TSC, and then that member can notify the TSC anonymously. So basically, you can't block without telling anyone from the TSC, but like you just need one person that can inform the rest of the TSC.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, that's it basically.
Any questions, comments before we move on to the next issue? Okay, so the next one is number 828, which is have a mascot. I think Matteo, you opened that. Not sure who put it on the agenda, but I don't know if Matteo, if you want to talk to it.
Oh, the question is, do we want to have a mascot? If you don't want to have a mascot, please voice now. And then I think the proposal is for us to give the mandate to the OpenJS marketing team to find us a mascot with certain guidelines. Okay, the historical mascot, the historical unofficial mascot of Node was the rocket turtle, and it's also on the repo itself. So it's been on the repo almost forever. So I don't know. This is a question for everybody. So if I think having a mascot will help the project, so we can have a mascot or officialize the mascot and have a nicer blog post for it or something, like telling a little bit of the story. But yeah, I think that's the idea. If and the key point is letting the OpenJS marketing more or less trying to organize a process to select them, so that selecting a mascot with 18 people or something is going to be very tricky.
Yagas has his hand up, but I think it's from the last conversation.
Yes, my bad.
All right.
So I guess does anybody have any questions for Matteo or any concerns about having a mascot? I guess that's your ask, is to, like, if there is a concern, jump in, otherwise into that issue. Otherwise, I don't know, Matteo, do you have a timeline for asking the OpenJS Foundation to organize the process?
I would say, I don't know, next CPC in 1 week or something, couple of weeks.
In the,
maybe
issue, in the TSC repository, Kylie said that she would get back to the TSC once she has a plan.
Yeah.
So Matteo can follow up with Kylie, I suppose.
Yeah. I can liaison. I'm just, they were busy with the conferences, so they should be back now this week. So but if there is anything, please, voice the concerns that you have. Like a few people voices the concern that no, we should not have a frog. Okay. And something like that. But the rocket turtles in putting everybody, okay. But if there are concerns, please voice them.
Okay, so if I summarize it, the process is moving forward. We're just waiting on the OpenJS staff. So basically, yeah, comment now if you have concerns. Otherwise, it sounds like it's already in progress. Anything else we should discuss on that one? Okay, if not, let's move on to the next issue, which is tagged for Node.js.node. That one is 49344, which is nvar node v8 coverage intermittently causes test running or to hang. I think, Matteo, you added that to the agenda.
Yeah, I added that to the agenda for visibility, mostly because this is, I think, something very critical on Node 20. Really, like, it's a very critical issue that unfortunately we, went to the bottom of it now after we finished off quite a few other problems that they were in the 20 release. So basically, there is a bug in which if you are using the Node Core test coverage, the V8 test coverage, the process just hangs. And it doesn't close and this is a combination of multiple bugs everywhere. So it's very, we are still tracking down the exact cause of it. Okay, we have seen that having using finalization registry is a sure way to get it, but there are a few other bugs. Why the reason why it's in the agenda, it's because if you're building a project using ESM, native ESM, there is no other way to get code coverage that is not node core based, the internal one based. So the old school NYC, Istanbul, and so on does not work anymore. And because of that, you know, ESM projects in V20 are essentially without code coverage in any form. So yeah, this is, I have been working with this with Colin and a few other engineers in Platformatic. So it's we are working on it, but this is, in my point of view, a major blocker for a lot of other stuff. So, and if like failing to provide this kind of this level of tooling can provide some sort of backlash if we call this release stable.
I see
And,
Jeffrey has his hand up.
I was just going to say, I feel like lots of projects don't use code coverage. Like they use other types of tests. They do automated tests, etc. And so there's a lot of people that would be harmed by this and would feel that this is not like a, you know, core required feature of Node to be saying that this release can't be LTS, especially with an indeterminate schedule for, like, we may never fix this for all we know. So like, if we want to hold off for a few weeks just to give people more time to investigate it, for the ideal case of being able to go to LTS with this. But I think you have to, like, if you want to propose a delay, you need a time box where, okay, we delay by 2 weeks or whatever, but then if it's not fixed, we go to LTS anyway, or something like that.
sorry,
Richard has his hand up. Sorry.
no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if Matteo wants to reply to that, go ahead. Otherwise, yeah, I do have stuff to say.
So Matteo,
Okay,
I think Richard's saying go ahead. No.
Yeah, I will.
Okay,
Okay, I was. Yep. So Antoine makes a good point in the chat that, you know, Node 20 is stable. I mean, it's not LTS yet, but I mean, current releases are stable. There's no stable, unstable branches of releases of Node. All releases of Node are supposedly stable. The other point of this is the release working group's decision to make. So we can make recommendations as the TSC to the release working group about changing the LTS date, but the LTS date, that's a policy decision that's delegated to the release working group. And I agree with Jeffrey that I would be against an indefinite delay, because then Node 20 may never become LTS. If it's a time box delay, we can have a discussion. I think it's a bit tricky with moving things like December major like date for, like, say, Node 21, or the LTS date for, like, Node 20, because those are things that companies and other, you know, interested parties build plans around. There is stuff in the release working group repository about release dates and LTS transition dates and when you can change those. And I think from memory, we may already be up against the point that we can change the LTS date according to policy. I'd have to go back and reread what we've actually written down in the release working group repository, but we have definitely written down something about when you can change the date, because in the past, a date change has caused significant fallout in the community. So changing the date is not something we do lightly. Now, that isn't to say that, you know, if there is a very good reason, we discuss it within the release working group and may make that decision. But again, it's I think it'll be very unlikely if it's not clear that, you know, this would be resolved within a short time period.
I see Joy has her hand up.
Is it clear that this would need a single major change to fix? Because otherwise I don't understand why postponing the LTS would do anything, because you can always backport a fix if it's not something that requires a breaking change. And from the look of it, I haven't looked into it in detail. I don't think this will require breaking change. I might be wrong, but it doesn't look like it.
I think back to Matteo and then
Joey, could you put your hand down?
I see. Okay, Matteo did put his hand down. Maybe I just wanted to add.
Sorry, I was
wonder-
trying to speak. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
I didn't unmute myself.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
I was speaking and I didn't unmute. So the problem, the reason why I'm saying that, okay, is because essentially, if a lot of people will start updating while it's LTS, okay, and then we will get either a lot of hate on everywhere because it's broken, okay. The most application will, like quite a significant number of applications will fail in running their test on Node 20. And we know that because Node 20 broke a lot of packages on Sigim. So we know that, okay? And this is somewhat related, by the way, if you want to, like this problem is actually related to all the failures in quite a lot of cases that we had in Sigim. And they will be broken, the CI will be broken, and we will be getting a lot of issues and reports and, you know, not developer love. So it's that's the reason. It's more on the not too much on the process side, but more on the message we send out in to the rest of the community. And it's a message, and then if the TSC, if everything decide, well, we are keeping it stable and so on and so forth. We mark it LTS anyway, and then we mark it LTS anyway, and we get the fallout. But at least we need to know that there's going to be a significant, at least from my specific point of view, fallout from this because of broken tests. So if you update Node and your project, you cannot run the test anymore because your code coverage fails, then you are either you're saying that the code coverage is not something that you want to, people should not use, and this is another interesting point to make, possibly, but otherwise it seems a very critical feature of the platform. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. I'm not, again, I have been trying to chase this flakiness and CGIM problem for quite some time. And this is to the bottom of it, we are looking at LLDB backtrace to find out where in V8 the crash has happened. Where in V8, there is an infinite loop that is triggered inside V8, essentially. And which is partially where the Semver major thing can help. But, you know, we'll cross that bridge when it's there. It's literally just quite a lot of people will not be able to update to V20 straight away, essentially. This is and saying differently would be problematic. I would also add that some of those problems are inside Node itself, specifically inside how fetch is implemented. Now I've released that we are trying to update Undici to a latest version that has changes a little bit the behavior and is a little tad bit less spec compliant if there is code coverage enabled to avoid that a path that was surely causing the loop. But it's from my point of view, it's very serious. And also passing the message that code coverage doesn't count is very serious. But again, this is for the group to discuss.
Yeah, so I think my hand was up next. I think my suggestion would be like one option is that we keep the LTS switch, you know, unless we know, like if it was like, we'll have this fixed in a week, then I kind of agree with other people. Like if it's bounded, we might make a delay. Otherwise, I think if we stuck with the switch date, we could signal in the announce that like, yeah, we discussed this issue. We balanced off the impact of moving the date, because I think there is a significant impact. Like I think Richard said, people make plans around those dates versus the people that would be affected. And, while we decided to ship, we understand this is an important issue and it's a high priority issue the project's working on to fix this, right? So try and mitigate that, the message you're saying, Matteo, about saying this isn't important, we can explicitly say, no, we do believe this is important, but, we had to make a hard choice. This is the choice we made.
Yeah, it's as long as it's communicated to people as a known issue or something.
Yeah, like actually, we could put that right front and center, right?
It's as long as it's clear, because it's again, we have all been seeing all the failures in CGIM and so on and so on. It's all connected, okay? To be honest, it's all tied together with this, like, those tests that never ends on CGIM. It's the time's out. So that is I would be good with that approach as part of the release notes, and saying this is there is a regression there that can cause problem if you're using ESM and the C8 code coverage tool.
Okay, I think
C8, sorry, the node core C8 node core code coverage.
Okay, I think Joy had her hand up next.
Can you put your hand down, Michael?
Yeah, just give me a sec.
I think the messaging, like as far as I understand, the messaging with the stable current and LTS stuff is, once it's out, it's already stable. So V20 is already stable. By making it LTS, it means that we will backport fixes when we have fixes. It doesn't mean we will, it's bug free, because any software cannot be bug free, obviously. The guarantee is that when we have fixes, we will make sure that we backport them. And I think that's already good enough for like making it to LTS. Well, we guarantee that when we have fixes, before it goes out of support, we'll backport it. I think that's the best thing that we can give for this bug now.
Okay, Richard has his hand up.
Yeah, no, that's completely correct. I mean, LTS is both the promise of backporting fixes, depending on what phase. I mean, at the beginning, we're talking about active LTS versus maintenance, but maintenance is a good year away. Yeah, the other part of the LTS is slowing down things landing. So, I mean, if we had a fix, we might expedite it. But once something goes LTS, then the usual thing is that we, as a policy, usually require things to go out in a current release before we land it or backport it to an LTS line. So it is an extra ring of caution, I guess. It's all about risk management. It's trying to say, once we put a release into an LTS phase, we will try and take additional steps beyond just running the test suite and making the test suite pass to try and mitigate risk going into LTS. Now, that doesn't mean to say that we've not let things through inadvertently in the past, but it is, as was mentioned, they're all stable releases. It's just the LTS release has extra process around it to try and put more checks or reduce the likelihood of inadvertently introducing like regressions. I mean, that is the difference between a sort of LTS and current release. And also, while I agree that coverage is important for if you're releasing something, I suspect most people are not running coverage in production. So whether you would deploy something to production without having gone through your testing is another question. But I agree that we can put out messaging in the release notes or even a separate blog post if you feel that's necessary. But I think in the past we have gone out. I can't remember if we've done it for an LTS release, but we've definitely done it on major releases where we've put notes about known issues in that release that haven't been fixed yet.
Okay, I don't see any hands. Oh, I see Joy has her hands up again.
I think one thing that might help in the release announcement is that we figure out which version, roughly where this started, and we figure out a good version that people can like downgrade to, or like as a immediate step before they upgrade to the latest LT version. Some kind of recommendation. If you run into this bug, you can try downgrade to this one and wait until we figure it out and backport it. I think that might help.
Richard has hand up again.
I suppose the other way is also interesting. I don't know if anyone's tried to see if we can reproduce the hangs on. I think there is a proposal for V8 update to 11. Is it 11.8? I can't remember what the current PR that we've got for Node 21 is. Or even the Node 21 proposal. No, I don't think we've landed the V8 update there. But has this been fixed already in a later V8 version? And I guess also, is this something that was introduced during 20, or did it come in the 20.0 version where we actually did the major V8 update for Node 20?
Okay, I did see there was one question in the chat from Tobias, which asked us, like, is this a problem in 20.0.0, which I think is a little bit what Richard was just saying as well, due to V8 version, or someone bisected it to a later commit. So I don't know, Matteo, if you know the answer to that one.
We like bisecting these kind of things, which doesn't, it's essentially flaky. It's a flaky behavior, is risk condition. It's actually takes a little bit of time. Okay, and the exact condition for this this thing happens is not entirely clear. Like, we have repros, but very tied to specific code bases, not in at least 2 or 3 different code bases we can reproduce the problems, but not tied to, not a generic repro that basically make it crash all the time, make it angst all the time. So we are currently trying to reproduce it and bisect it. Like, I'm trying to get a firm answer on which releases introduced the problem in myself, and once we get that, that would give us a good answer, I think.
Okay. Joy is okay. Just
Yes.
hands up or down?
Yeah, hands up. Like, does this only reproduce when you use test runner, or does it also reproduce when
you can just, if you set node_v8 coverage, that's it.
Does it affect any other test runner? That's not the core.
It's not related to the test runner at all. It's related to the core, to the node core code coverage via the inspector and so on and so forth.
From what I can tell from the issue is the coverage and the finalization registry. We cannot, I don't know, demote finalization registry, but we can, as an alternative, make no V8 coverage experimental again. I don't know if that's a good idea, but yeah, just an idea.
Yeah, well, this is a good this is a question mark. Okay, I have no good answer at this point. So what I'm doing is I'm removing I have made changes in Undici so that whenever so that it doesn't use finalization registry if the V8 coverage is enabled, so that at least we can have that line stable, okay, in the sense that not crashing if that's the case. But this is used by C8 and a few other test runner now. Like, it's very recommended. We tell people use this for code coverage. That's the problem. Okay. So
Robert has his hand up.
Oh, sorry.
Matteo, the change you did in Undici, where you basically replaced the finalization registry with a no-op variant.
Yeah.
Couldn't we just do that inside of Node so it applies everywhere until we have a better solution?
It's the finalization registry is one of the triggers. Okay, it's not a complete trigger. So even without that, I can reproduce the bug. If I run the script, if I run the repro long enough, I can reproduce it. But yes, generically, that could be an option.
Yeah, I mean, because it makes the situation a little bit better, and it's better
Yeah,
than all these projects having to do this hack themselves, and then when we fix it, then all these projects have to remove it. So it's better to centralize the hack, if you know what I mean.
this is a this is a true possibility,
Okay.
but it's not until it's right now, until it's clear what the exact problem. It's very hard to make this kind of recommendation.
Okay, so I think so. I'll let Joey go, and then maybe we should just close out. I have a final question, then we can move on to some of the other agenda items. So Joey, go ahead.
On the specific question about can we make it a no-op? I don't think so, because I know that there are packages in the wild relying on it to work, even though the specification tell you not to do that. This is not what it's designed for. But for example, Jest has a leak detector that kind of relies on this to work. And I agree with Tobias' suggestion in the chat to fix it with the minimal DA reproduction. This looks more like a VA bug than something we do. It seems that we just schedule tasks in a way that makes it easier to trigger, but you can also trigger it with a finalization registry. I don't quite understand. I'm not very familiar with that, with the implementation of that, but I think it schedules some kind of task, delay task maybe, and that kind of scheduling can result in a deadlock when you run into some unfortunate situation. That doesn't seem to be like a node thing. It's more like a VA. It's more like VA not implementing the text runner scheduling properly or something. So I would suggest we try to take it to V8.
Okay, so I think just so we have some time for the other issues, my think through the discussion. I'm wondering if we have consensus that, like, if we don't have a good bounded timeline, that the approach would be to document it in the release notes and the release announcement. I think Matteo, you'd said you'd probably be okay with that.
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm as long as it's recognized and documented of. And people, my problem here is that we get a storm of people complaining. Okay, like Jest does not work, X does not work, and so on and so forth. Okay, and a lot of people perceive when we mark a release as LTS as stable, and we should upgrade now. And people we are setting up, ourselves for a bad marketing campaign, essentially, if when then doing so. So.
Right. So I think, the priority seems to be if there's any changes that help fix those, then, possibly getting them in later than we might like to into the release, but otherwise shipping and, documenting them in the release announcement. Does anybody have any concerns with that approach, prefer a different approach, or can I note that as like, a viable way forward unless we get new information? Okay, I don't hear any objections, so I may put that as a comment in the, like, some summary of the discussion in the issue itself. But everybody, of course, feel free to jump in there. The next one on the agenda is 41445, which is when to make default -type module the default. And I think, Jeffrey, you probably added that to the list.
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion on that issue. Doesn't seem to be going toward a consensus. So I don't know. I mean, I guess like we could, we kind of discussed it already at a previous meeting, but maybe it wasn't quite formalized. Like there's a lot of members on this call. So like, do we want to make do we want to make this the default at some point in the future would be maybe the first question to answer. I'm kind of assuming that we do because of the previous conversations, but maybe I could just ask that to the room before proceeding. Or does anyone object to, at some point, some future version, default type equals module is the node default?
I think, like, for me, it's in the fullness of time, it's it makes sense if everybody switches over and it's the one. Like, if 90% of the people or 95% of the people were already using the flag, then switching the default makes sense, right? Like, so it's hard to predict the future.
Well, I mean, this would be like with the assumptions of what was on that thread, that like, yeah, the flag would no longer be experimental. We've resolved any issues that people present with it. Like, obviously, we're not going to flip before it's ready. But, assuming we've gone through all that.
Yeah, and I don't really mean ready. I guess, like, adoption is there, right? Like, it's ready to be used and it's being used by enough people that flipping it just makes it easier on the ecosystem versus harder. I mean, I guess it's like your first question is, does anybody think that we should never do this regardless of adoption?
Yes, that's a better way of putting it.
Matteo has his hand up.
I think it's the future. Like, it's inevitable. The question is, how do we minimize the fall and how do we minimize the breakage? But it's inevitable.
Okay, so if
that's my 2 cents, at least. Okay, if I can add something, I'm bringing, and with I want to add with regret. Okay, it's with regret. It's inevitable. Okay, so but it's inevitable. Like, I don't see a future for Node if this does not happen someday.
And there were some interesting ideas on that thread that I think are worth pursuing, but just for the sake of us discussing this, I think we should assume that, like, there's going to be some pain. Like, there's no way to just do this and eliminate all pain. So maybe it won't be as bad as if we made the switch tomorrow, but there's only so much we can do. There's only so much that we can, like, get through without getting blocked. Michael, are you wanting to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think the discussion started out and there's some urgency felt, like, in terms of the next release and what we could say going forward. I mean, I think I'd be along the lines of saying, hey, like, one of the things we can call out in the release now is this flag's been added to make it easier for people to use it in this mode, and with the thought that possibly at some point in the future it would become the default, and leave it at that, right? Like, not specify any timeline, but mention that, like, it could happen. I don't know how other people think on that front.
I mean, that was basic.
Yeah, go ahead.
That was basically what I wrote I wrote like a 4-sentence, like, snippet of, like, yeah, here's the potential announcement that this flag exists, explain what it is, and then be like, we hope right now the default is CommonJS, and if you don't use the flag, it's the same as if you did CommonJS, but that we hope to make the default module, or plan to make the default module in the future. This would be a Semver major change, so it could come as early as 22, or
Right, that's
or a
much
later
stronger
version.
That's way stronger than what I said.
Right,
like,
I didn't say it was equivalent. I just said that it's
Yeah.
in the same vein.
Right. So, but I think, like, I'm comfortable with what I've said, but I wouldn't be comfortable with what you've said, because it's kind of promising that it could happen in 22, whereas being much vaguer, it's like, hey, we've got this flag, and like Matteo said, it's inevitable, but that doesn't mean that we say 6 months from now something's going to happen, right? Because I personally think it's probably much longer than 6 months. If it's less, great, but I think it's going to be, year, 2 years, whatever.
I think I mean, obviously we're not going to promise anything. Like I can't, even if I wanted to, I can't say that it will happen in 22 because who knows, right? But I think there's some benefit in trying to tell people that this is happening sooner than later, even if it ends up happening in 18 months. If people are aware that it could happen in 6 months, that'll accelerate some migration. Like companies will invest in getting their stuff ready for it and so on. And I think that's really valuable. Like that my last post on that thread was like this mountain of complaints that users are giving us, all the struggles they have dealing with CommonJS and ESM interop. The only real solution to that is to just get over the migration and have most things be in ESM, most people using ESM. And so, you know, even just saying that it might happen soon, even if it ends up happening later, if that encourages a faster migration, I think that's a good thing. You know, like what's the downside of saying it might happen? You know, yeah, I mean, people might yell at us, but until we actually make the flip, you know.
I think even just saying that there's a possibility we may get lots of discussion, complaints, right? Like, so that's, you know, that's why I'm
That's
like,
good.
yeah, being vague is already going to trigger stuff, but saying like 22 is going to trigger too much stuff, at least my personal opinion, right? So
But like,
I
what would be bad about that? People yelling at us that we're going too fast? I mean, what's the?
you're going to break, like if it's going to break, like, you know, it comes down to the discussion, I think, at least in the issue, is like how many people are going to be broken and forced to fix things. You might look at it and say, well, 6 months, that's plenty of time for somebody to change their applications. But I think many companies and many people who run applications, it takes them forever to change it. So if you're going to,
Yeah, well, it doesn't take 6
sharing
months to
them,
add type CommonJS to a package JSON file. You know what I mean? Like they don't have to refactor any code. It's sort of like, what are some major changes for if we can't break things? You know what I mean? Like nobody has to upgrade. Like at some point we need to be able to ship
Joy has her
breaking
hand up.
changes.
I don't think like sending a message to push people to upgrade in a shorter time frame is you know, doing more good than harm. Because another possible solution is that you don't upgrade. You just get stuck forever. I think we had that before with some people getting stuck with Node 0.12 forever, whatever. Or like people switching to a different runtime at all. Because like if you're going to break us, we might as well move to a different runtime that does not break us. Because what people value about Node.js is that they don't get broken. Otherwise, why would you still stick with Node.js?
So something I find a little frustrating on that thread is the repeated reference to, oh, we break users. And like, as if it's just like, we're flipping them off and there's nothing they can do about it. And there's no way they can fix anything. Like, we're not breaking, okay, we're introducing a breaking change that they must respond to. But the response is extremely easy. They add a flag or they add a type field to a package JSON and they're back to doing what they were doing before. That is a common Semver major change. And like the repeated invocation of we're breaking these users, like we're just making them do something differently is what we're doing. I don't consider it breaking them because they're still able to do what they were doing before.
I don't think like one change per project per script is you know, not a big deal because you can have many things to update. Like for example, you have, I don't know, tons of packages, which was common for Node.js to maintain, or you have tons of scripts, tons of snippets. Like if you're like writing a lot of blog posts, you need to update all of them. That kind of work can add up. It's not very trivial. It's not like you just do this thing to this one thing, but people can have many things to update.
I think Ruben has his hand up. Ruben, if you're speaking, you're on mute, or maybe.
Yes, do you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so I wanted to add something to what Joey was also just saying, like the small changes can easily sum up to a huge bunch of work. And we should not enforce anything like that at the moment. Like it would definitely send out the wrong incentive out of my perspective. So like adding a flag like that is fine to say for maybe like, hey, you can use this for testing purposes to see what modules might break by using it or something like that. But it's not, from my perspective, something we should even encourage. Like it's not a decision for us to take. That's my perspective.
Okay, Antoine had his hand up.
Yeah, yeah, I would add that I think it's more likely that we'll get consensus that the default will not be flipped in 22. So it would be more or less lying to put it in the release note that we have this plan, because first we want the flag to mature, so we'll probably get bugs, and it takes time to get the feedback, and also, yeah, the ecosystem breakage is something that cannot happen so soon. So yeah, I think it's a yeah. Let's not put it in the release note and try to find what we want to put, because I think it's clear that we don't want to put that in the release note. So maybe we should focus on what is more likely to end up in the release note.
Don't want to put the mention of 22 in the release note, you mean?
Yeah, that, I mean, I just what I understood was, Antoine was like, it's, if you polled the members, most likely we'd say we're not going to flip it in 22, so we shouldn't be saying that in the release notes.
That's fine. I would still say though that like if we do have consensus that we plan to flip it, let's say so. Because like I think the more concrete we can be, the more that will motivate, the kind of bigger actors like TypeScript and so on to plan for it and invest in getting things ready. The flag has given them a way to test what it will be like when that mode is the default. And so like, here you go, get all your stuff working that way, or find it, uncover any issues and send us bug reports.
Okay, we are right at time. So, Joey, you've got your hand up, so I'll give you the last minute.
So I think it's still too soon to like say anything about the flag, because first of all, it's experimental. It's not yet released or tested in the wild. I don't think it's very appropriate to like, say something that, oh, we'll do something breaking based on this thing that's still experimental. I think it's too soon. And also we're still not sure, like if this is absolutely the only way we're going to speed up the adoption. There can be other ways. We can make it non-breaking or less breaking. We don't have to like break all CommonJS now code to like speed up ESM adoption, or like we can do something to make that the default, like supporting that default, because what you were worrying about was that people cannot run ESM code by default. But I don't know, we can make both run by default, and then eventually at some distant future we break CommonJS. It does not have to break CommonJS to support ESM by default. We don't have to like go to a corner and really obsessed with this fact alone. We can think of other solutions. So yeah.
I mean, I have a few ideas, some of them, and I'm thinking of writing one of them up as a proposal, but basically all the ideas that are along those lines have been proposed over the last 5 years and rejected at one time or another. I mean, maybe times have changed and people are more open to things along those lines now. I think it's worth investigating. I'll open an issue to see, but I'm kind of assuming like it's so hard to make progress in this area. You know, that's why we have the interop situation that we do. So.
Okay, so I think at this point, you know, we're at time. So we should likely move the discussion back to GitHub, and we'll leave it on the agenda for next time.
When do we have to write the announcement for 21?
Well, I think it goes, is it the 17th? So it's within, we don't have a lot of time. I would, you know, probably in that issue, proposing some alternate wording would be good. Something you think based on the discussion here, people would be okay with. I kind of made my proposal. We'll see. You can work on something you think.
Yeah,
is
if you want to
somewhat
copy,
between the
can you
two of
copy
them.
your proposal into that thread, and we can start a new issue?
Sure.
And yeah, whoever's in charge of writing that announcement, if you can please involve me or post on this issue to involve anyone who's interested in this, so we can all review it.
Yeah, it's usually the foundation gets involved in doing that, but try and remember. Okay, I think we agreed that we would not have a private session. Anybody correct me if I'm wrong? Okay, well then, thanks for everybody's time and good discussion.